Welcome to Creepy Encounter. Tonight, we'll explore three true stories that'll make you think twice before being alone in the dark. These aren't ghost tales or urban legends. They're the kind of encounters that could happen to anyone, maybe even you. So, sit back, turn off your lights, and let's begin. I've worked security for nearly a decade, mostly night shifts. You get used to the quiet, the emptiness, the creaks that sound like footsteps but aren't. Or at least, you think you do. Last winter, my company assigned me to a property on the outskirts of town, an abandoned textile factory that had been closed since the late 90s. The building was massive, 4 floors, a basement, and more than 60,000 square feet of cold, empty concrete. The city was planning to demolish it in a few months, but vandals kept breaking in, so I was hired to patrol at night, alone. The first few nights were routine. I'd make rounds every hour, check the locks, and sit in the main office watching the security feeds. Most of the cameras didn't even work anymore. The monitors showed static and flickering gray screens. Around the fifth night, something changed. It started with the elevator. The thing hadn't worked since the early 2000s. But as I sat in the office that night, I heard the unmistakable sound of metal cables grinding, like the elevator was moving. At first I thought maybe a raccoon or something had gotten stuck in the shaft. But then the ding echoed through the halls, that soft mechanical chime. I froze. The sound came from the far end of the building, right near the old basement access. I grabbed my flashlight and headed down the corridor, my boots crunching on broken glass. The air grew colder the closer I got to the basement door. When I reached it, I noticed it was slightly open, just a few inches, even though I'd locked it earlier that night. I shone my flashlight inside. The beam cut through layers of dust and darkness, landing on the rusted elevator doors. They were closed, but the floor indicator above them glowed a faint red B, the basement. I stood there for a long minute, listening, nothing. I decided to head down the stairs to check it out. I hated that part. Those stairs were narrow, steep, and smelled like mold and old water. The light switch didn't work anymore, so I had to rely on my flashlight. About halfway down, I heard it again. The ding, followed by a slow mechanical shh as the elevator doors opened. I stopped moving. The beam from my flashlight wobbled as my hands started to shake. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing down the stairwell. "This area's private property." No response. Just that low humming sound from the elevator machinery, echoing faintly. I reached the bottom of the stairs and turned the corner into the basement corridor. It was colder than before. My breath came out in pale clouds. The elevator stood about 20 feet away. Its doors were half open, revealing a pitch-black interior. I stepped closer, my flashlight beam flicking inside. There was nothing, just an empty, dust-covered floor. But before I could relax, I noticed footprints, fresh ones, small bare feet, imprinted in the dust leading away from the elevator, and they led deeper into the basement. Every instinct in me said to leave, call it in, and wait for backup. But I knew the company wouldn't bother sending anyone at 3 a.m., so I followed the prints. The deeper I went, the more decayed the air smelled. Mildew, rust, and something faintly metallic. The old storage rooms were lined with broken furniture and toppled shelves. Then I heard a faint scraping sound, like someone dragging something heavy across the concrete. I froze, turned off my flashlight, and listened. It came again, slower this time, closer. When I turned the flashlight back on, the beam caught a flicker of movement at the far end of the hall. A person. They were standing in the shadows, back turned toward me, completely still. I shouted, "Hey, hey, you're trespassing, turn around." No response. Then, without warning, the figure tilted its head. Not all the way, just a slow, unnatural angle. And it started moving toward me. I stepped back. The person, if you could call it that, moved strangely, like their body didn't bend right. Their steps were uneven, jerky, like a puppet on strings. My light shook as I raised it higher, trying to get a look at the face. But when the beam caught it, I realized it wasn't just a person. Its eyes were black, not from makeup or shadow, just pure, glossy black. The skin around its mouth was torn, like it had been cut into a permanent, stretched grin. It took another step closer. That was enough for me. I turned and ran. I sprinted back up the stairs, slamming the basement door shut and locking it. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it echo through the empty hallways. I radioed it in, but no one answered. The signal always cut out in that part of the building. The next morning, when the day shift guard arrived, I told him what I saw. He laughed, said the place had stories, that workers had died down there in the early 90s when the factory was still running. I didn't believe in ghosts. Not really. But when we went down later to check, the elevator doors were wide open again. And inside, written in the dust on the metal wall, were 5 words. "Don't come down here again." That was my last shift at the factory. I quit the next day. The company never asked me why. They probably didn't care. But I'll never forget that night. Because sometimes, when I close my eyes, I still hear that elevator ding. And I can't help but wonder if it's waiting for me to come back down. I used to work as a night security guard at an abandoned hospital on the edge of the city. The place had been shut down for almost 15 years, and I was told my job was simple: keep out vandals, squatters, and the occasional group of thrill seekers who try to sneak in after dark. The building was old but massive. 6 floors, a basement morgue, and wings that stretched out like the bones of a dead animal. Only one section still had electricity: the lobby and the security office. Everything else was pitch black. The first time I walked those halls, my footsteps echoed forever. The air was stale and heavy, the smell of disinfectant still clinging to the walls like a memory that wouldn't fade. I didn't believe in ghosts or hauntings, but by the end of that first week, I started doubting everything I thought I knew. It began on a Thursday night, just after 2 a.m. I was sitting in the office, sipping stale coffee and scrolling through my phone when I heard the intercom crackle. That shouldn't have been possible. The intercom system was dead. Static hissed through the speaker above my head, followed by a faint voice. At first, I couldn't make out what it said. Just the tone. Calm. Soft like someone talking to a patient. Then I heard the words clearly. "Room 306, patient is ready." The hairs on my neck stood up. There was a room 306. I remembered seeing the faded number plate on the 3rd floor during my first walk-through. But there was no power on that level. No working equipment. No reason that voice should have come through the intercom. I grabbed my flashlight and radio and made my way upstairs. The stairwell was freezing. My flashlight beam cut through layers of dust floating in the air like ash. When I reached the 3rd floor, I noticed something strange. The hallway lights were flickering, not fully on, but dim flashes, like the building was trying to wake up after being dead for years. I walked slowly toward room 306. Every few steps, my boot hit broken glass or a fallen ceiling tile. Then I saw the door. It was slightly open, and inside, I could hear something moving, a faint scraping sound, like metal against the floor. I called out, "This is security. You can't be in here." The sound stopped. I pushed the door open, with my flashlight raised. The room was empty, old hospital bed in the center, rusted forestand, nothing else. But when I stepped closer, I noticed something. The bed wheels were clean. Everything else was covered in years of dust, except the wheels, like the bed had been moved. Recently, my radio crackled behind me. "Patient is ready for discharge." The voice again. Calm, flat, but this time, it came from my radio, not the intercom. I turned the volume down and whispered, "Who is this?" "Identify yourself." No reply. Then I heard a sound from the hallway. The squeak of wheels, the same sound hospital beds make when they're being rolled. I ran to the doorway and pointed my flashlight down the corridor. A bed was moving, on its own, slowly rolling down the hall. I froze. My brain couldn't process it. It stopped near the end of the corridor, right in front of the elevator doors. The old indicator above them flickered red. B. Basement. And then, as if pulled by invisible hands, the elevator doors opened. The bed rolled inside, the doors shut, and the elevator started moving down. I didn't follow right away. I stood there for at least 30 seconds, my heart pounding, the silence pressing in around me. Finally, I forced myself to move. I took the stairs. The elevator was way too risky, and made my way down to the basement level. The air down there was colder, damp. It smelled like rot. Only my flashlight kept the darkness away. When I reached the hallway outside the morgue, I saw the elevator doors open. The bed was sitting there, motionless. And on it was a shape. Someone was lying under a stained white sheet. I told myself it had to be a prank. Some kid sneaked in and set this up to scare me. But as I got closer, I realized the sheet was slowly rising and falling, like someone was breathing underneath. I froze. "Hey," I said, my voice shaking. "Whoever you are, this isn't funny." No movement. I reached out and pulled the sheet back. The bed was empty, no one there. Just an indent on the mattress, shaped like a human body, and still warm to the touch. I backed away slowly, my flashlight trembling in my hand. Then my radio crackled again. "Security, return the patient." It was the same calm voice, but this time it sounded closer. I turned around. Someone was standing in the doorway of the morgue. At first, I thought it was another guard. But the longer I looked, the less sense it made. He was wearing a hospital gown, the old kind that tied in the back. His skin looked gray, almost translucent under the flashlight. And his face. It wasn't right. His eyes were sunken deep, like they'd been hollowed out, and his mouth was hanging open, as if he was trying to speak but couldn't remember how. He took one slow step toward me, then another. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the gurney. "Stay right there," I shouted, raising my flashlight like a weapon. He didn't stop. He just kept walking toward me. Slow mechanical steps, his bare feet slapping the cold floor. I turned and ran. By the time I reached the stairs, I could hear the elevator ding behind me. I didn't look back. I ran up 3 flights and slammed the door shut behind me, locking it with the old bolt. When I got to the security office, I grabbed my phone to call the police. But there was no signal. The monitors were all black except one. The basement camera. On the screen, the gurney was still sitting in front of the elevator, and the man in the gown was lying on it again, perfectly still, the sheet covering him. Just before the feed got to static, I swear I saw his head turn toward the camera. The police came the next morning after I refused to stay for my next shift. They said they didn't find anyone down there, but they did find the old power switch for the elevator, locked in the on position, though no one had touched it in years. I quit that job the next day. Every so often, I drive past that hospital. The windows are boarded up, the lot overgrown with weeds. But sometimes, when I stop at the light nearby, I could swear I see a faint glow from one of the third-floor windows, room 306. And if you listen closely enough, you might hear it too. That faint voice over the intercom. Patient is ready. I used to work night shifts at a small gas station off Highway 9. One of those 24-hour places that always looks like it's 3 a.m., no matter what time it is. I took the job because it was quiet, easy money, and I didn't mind being alone. The gas station sat between two long stretches of road with nothing but forest on either side. No street lights, no houses, just the buzzing neon sign and the constant hum of the refrigerators. Most nights were dead, maybe 2 or 3 cars an hour. You start to enjoy the silence until it turns into something else. I worked there for 8 months, but there's one night I'll never forget. The night I learned that some things come out after midnight, and not all of them are alive. It was a Friday late November, cold enough that my breath fogged up inside the store. The heater had gone out again, and my manager kept promising he'd fix it. Around 2:30 a.m., a storm rolled in. The rain hit the roof hard enough to drown out the radio, and every few minutes the lights flickered. I was sitting behind the counter, scrolling through my phone, when I noticed movement outside the front window. A man was standing by pump 3. He wasn't getting gas, just standing there, completely still, with his back to the building. At first I thought maybe he was waiting for a ride, but no cars had passed in over half an hour. He was tall, wearing a long dark coat and what looked like an old hat. His clothes looked soaked from the rain, but he didn't move. I waited a minute, watching. Still no movement. Then, as the lightning flashed, I swear I saw his head turn slightly toward the glass. Just enough to show one pale eye staring right at me. I jumped up and went to the door. When I looked again, he was gone. The rain kept falling, heavy and loud. I stepped outside under the awning, scanning the pumps, but the lot was empty. No footprints in the puddles. No sign anyone had been there. I went back inside and locked the door, trying to shake off the chill crawling up my spine. About 10 minutes later, the power flickered again. When it came back, one of the lights in the back freezer section started buzzing. That high, sharp sound fluorescent lights make before they burn out. I grabbed a step stool and went to check it out. The back aisle was cold, the kind of cold that seeps through your clothes. As I reached the freezers, I noticed something odd. The door on the far right cooler was fogged up, except for one handprint smeared across the glass. It was fresh, and it was on the inside. I stared at it for a few seconds, half expecting it to be a trick of the condensation. But then the glass tapped from the inside. 3 slow, deliberate taps. I stumbled back, my heart pounding. The freezer was dark. All the interior lights were off. I could only see my reflection and that handprint. Then it tapped again. I ran to the front counter and grabbed my flashlight. When I shone it back toward the freezers, the handprint was gone. The glass was clean. I stood there for a long time, just listening to the storm and the low hum of the fridges. Then the power went out completely. The silence after that was heavy, like the building itself was holding its breath. The only light came from my flashlight beam bouncing off the glass doors. I decided to check the circuit breaker in the back room near the storage freezer. The door creaked as I opened it. The smell of old cardboard and detergent hit me. I found the breaker box, flipped the main switch. Nothing. That's when I heard it. A faint scraping sound coming from the walk-in freezer, like fingernails dragging slowly down metal. I turned toward the noise. The freezer door was slightly ajar. Frost creeping along the edges. Cold air spilled out, making my skin sting. I took one step closer, shining my light inside. The shelves were empty except for a few boxes of frozen snacks. Then, at the far end, I saw a figure standing in the corner. It looked like a man. Tall, shoulders hunched forward, his face pale and drawn, like skin stretched too tight over bone. He was wearing the same dark coat I'd seen outside by the pump, and he was facing the wall. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. "Sir, you're not supposed to be back here," I said, my voice trembling. He didn't move. I took another step, gripping the flashlight tighter. "Sir?" He turned his head slowly, impossibly slowly, until I could see the side of his face. His skin was cracked like ice, and his mouth was open too wide, stretching in a soundless grin. Then the lights came back on, and he was gone. The freezer was empty. No footprints, no frost disturbed. Just the sound of the compressor humming again. I ran out, slammed the door, and locked it. My hands were shaking as I called my manager. He didn't answer. When I finally looked back toward the aisles, I saw something that made my stomach twist. Every glass freezer door had a handprint on it now, dozens of them, and all of them were on the inside. I backed up against the counter, trying not to scream. Then, one by one, the handprints started to fade, like they were being wiped away from the other side. The final one left a single word in the condensation before it vanished completely. Cold. By the time the sun came up, I was sitting outside in my car with the doors locked, waiting for the next shift to arrive. When my manager finally showed up, I told him what happened. He just stared at me for a minute, then said quietly, "You saw him too, didn't you?" I asked what he meant. He told me that 15 years ago, a truck driver had frozen to death inside that same walk-in freezer after getting locked in during a storm. They found him 2 days later, standing up, with one hand pressed against the door. I quit the job that morning, but even now, every time I stop at a gas station late at night, I catch myself glancing toward the freezer doors. And sometimes for just a second, I swear, I see the reflection of that man in the dark coat, standing right behind me.